Coming up on this Monday edition of Daybreak, the International Olympic Committee says reforms to be voted upon this week could allow Korea and Japan to change venues for their Olympic events to reduce costs and avoid unnecessary spending. In an unprecedented move, a top US lawmaker says Dokdo is the right name to refer to Korea's easternmost islets. Ed Royce also condemns Japan for its denial of wartime atrocities. Plus, protests condemning police brutality continue across the United States with no end in sight. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Monday, December 8th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. And our top story this morning, the International Olympic Committee will allow Korean and Japanese Olympic organisers to make some changes to their venue plans for the 2018 Winter and 2020 Summer Games if it helps cut costs and avoid unnecessary spending on new facilities that might not be used very much after the Games. IOC President Thomas Bach says that if proposed reforms are approved early this week, organisers of the 2018 Winter Games in Korea's alpine city of Pyeongchang and the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo can consider changing venues if necessary. The Olympic chief says officials from the IOC will visit Pyeongchang and Tokyo in the coming weeks to oversee preparations. The IOC reportedly proposed to the Pyeongchang Organising Committee that they could save tens of millions of dollars in construction costs and maintenance if it holds sliding events. So we're talking things like bobsleigh and luge in existing facilities in other countries. The head of Pyeongchang's Organising Committee, Jo Yang-ho, says the IOC reforms will present a lot of opportunities, but nothing has been decided as yet. Jo added that a number of ideas are under consideration without giving further details. Now, from Dokdo Island and Japan's refusal to make amends for its wartime atrocities to holding North Korea responsible for its provocations, US Congressman Ed Royce was asked to weigh in on a number of very controversial issues central to South Korea in a recent interview. His answers demonstrate quite clearly where his loyalties lie. Our Song Ji-son has more.
An 11-term U.S. lawmaker is making it clear where he stands on a number of issues that have placed South Korea at odds with neighbors. In a wide-ranging interview with Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency, Congressman Ed Royce, who is chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, said that understanding the past is key to understanding the present. On the issue of Dokdo Island, Royce openly rejected Japan's claims to the Korean territory and said its proper name is Dokdo, not the Lianku Rocks as the U.S. official refers to it, and not Takeshima, which is what Japan calls it. It's a rare assertion since the U.S. government takes no official position on the issue. Royce also slammed Tokyo for repeatedly declining to take responsibility for forcing women into sexual slavery before and during World War II. Calling it as horrifying as denying the Holocaust, Royce said Japan needed to admit history as it occurred to make for a better future. Regarding North Korea, Royce said he has introduced legislation that calls for stronger financial sanctions on the regime. The North Korea Sanctions Enforcement Act passed the House earlier this year and currently awaits approval by the Senate, although passage is unlikely in this current Congress. If the bill doesn't pass, Royce said he would reintroduce it once the new Congress comes in. In the meantime, the veteran lawmaker said Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo needed to work more closely with one another to maintain pressure on North Korea over its human rights violations and repeated provocations. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
The South Korean government will attempt to seek a more flexible and open stance in its negotiations with North Korea as it looks to build on President Park Geun-hye's North Korea policy as she enters her third year in office next year. Seoul's Unification Ministry says it's regretful inter-Korean relations have stalled and it's time to seek practical and realistic ways to boost ties. Ministry officials say they are considering a broad package of talks on topics including the resumption of reunions for families separated since the Korean War and reopening tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgang resort. But there is a condition to these talks actually happening. Seoul says North Korea has to apologize for its torpedoing of the South Korean warship Cheonan back in 2010. President Park Geun-hye has responded to allegations that some of her former aides have been meddling in state affairs, saying it's regrettable that unfounded rumors are obscuring progress on the things that really matter. Speaking at a luncheon at the presidential office of Cheongwadae on Sunday, President Park called on the ruling party lawmakers in attendance not to be swayed by the claims and focus on their jobs, that is, namely, boosting the economy. She stressed her top two priorities are still eradicating corruption and improving people's lives. An investigation is underway to determine who leaked internal documents from the presidential office that suggest the president's former aides had been undermining current officials. Negotiations for a regional free trade agreement for 12 countries known as TPP or Trans-Pacific Partnership have resumed in Washington. The six-day working-level meeting, which started on Sunday, follows last month's APEC summit in Beijing, in which leaders reaffirmed their will to conclude this agreement as early as next year. The TPP countries are expected to discuss outstanding issues such as intellectual property, and reform of state-owned firms to establish fair business competition in areas where developed and emerging economies have been at odds. The Pacific FTA involves Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, the United States and Vietnam. South Korea, which is not represented at these talks in Washington, announced its interest in taking part, though, in the TPP in November last year. Now, back here in South Korea, and as hard as they try, government measures to boost the economy are not taking hold as quickly as a great many people would like. And heading into next year, the strategy will centre around two objectives: fueling domestic demand and reforming the labour market. Park Ji-won reports.
Revitalizing the domestic market and carrying out structural reforms of the labor market. These are two pillars of the government's economic initiative next year as it tries to build momentum toward growth. First, the expansion of the domestic market. The government aims to achieve an economic growth rate in the 4% range next year and has realized that a supplementary budget alone won't be enough to get the job done. So the plan now calls for inducing more large-scale investments from the private sector next year by streamlining the complicated process of the private investment and lowering thresholds for private investments. For example, the government hopes to attract private investment to areas where only the government can invest, such as prisons. However, due to resistance from the opposition, it remains to be seen whether the plans will be realized. Increasing labor market flexibility is another pillar of next year's goal, specifically reducing the number of temporary jobs and reforming the regular job system. About 1/3 of all current workers are employed on a temporary basis. This means their salaries are lower and they are placed in more vulnerable working conditions than their regular counterparts. To get the private sector to transition more temporary employees into regular positions, it hopes to reform the rigid salary systems, especially for high-paid regular workers. However, experts stress that securing enough of a social safety net for the jobless, such as extending unemployment benefits and providing more job training, should also be a priority so as not to decrease domestic consumption. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, the number of elderly Koreans living in poverty is rising at a very troubling rate. The Korea Economic Research Institute says the number of elderly households below the poverty line came to 1.5 million last year, which is more than double the total from 2006. You might be wondering what their average income is each month. Well, it's a paltry $342. And at least 60% of that comes from subsidies handed out by the government and non-profits. The report noted that welfare policies for the elderly needs to be focused more on providing financial support rather than trying to find them employment in their old age. The average age of an elderly Korean citizen living under the poverty line last year was 78. Now, getting access to high-speed internet can be rather difficult for people living in remote areas of even Korea these days. And that's especially true for those living near the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas. Installing Wi-Fi there presents its very own unique set of challenges. But one of the country's largest telecommunications operators has pitched in, really, to narrow the digital divide. And students there are reaping the benefits. Paulie reports.
Taesongdong Elementary School in Paju is located just 1 kilometer from North Korea. At this school, the only one in the demilitarized zone, a smart technology education class is in full swing. The teacher, instead of writing on a chalkboard, uses an ultra-high-definition TV and a smart pen to interact with students. The children have their own tablet PCs to look through the digital materials of the lesson. The young students say that they're impressed by the new educational system.
I never had a chance to browse the internet with a tablet PC before. It is very easy to search for information.
Mobile carrier KT helped the school install the Giga Internet connection, which is 10 times faster than the existing high-speed internet. The move is part of efforts to roll out the Giga Internet service nationwide and improve competitiveness in telecommunications.
The DMZ is an area with a sad history of being divided for 60 years. We hope our Giga Internet service will help overcome the digital divide of education and culture in the area.
The advanced information technology aims to help students in remote areas connect to the rest of the world with a message of hope and opportunity. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
Well, as you'd expect, really, the K-pop craze is powered by a steady stream of Korean music, but the entertainment agencies responsible for creating some of the biggest names in the industry are now looking to emulate their success in some other areas, from fashion and cosmetics to even a travel agency. Our Connie Kim takes a look at their most recent pursuits in this week's Industry Insight.
Big Bang, Girls' Generation, Super Junior. There are few K-pop stars who have taken the world by storm, capped off, of course, by Psy and his YouTube hit Gangnam Style. Behind every great act in Korea is an entertainment agency that cultivates and promotes them. And leading the pack is YG Entertainment, one of the powerhouses driving the so-called Hallyu, or Korean wave. Founded in 1996, it created a success formula with idol groups like Big Bang and 21 and went public on Korea's tech-heavy Kosdaq stock market 3 years ago. YG now boasts annual revenue of some $104 million, more than 250 employees, and more than 20 artists under its belt. On the back of their success, entertainment giants are now branching out to other businesses. In September, YG launched apparel brand Nonigan, using its fashionable artists who influence fans all over the world to market it. Through pop-up stores in Italy, Hong Kong, and China, it aims to rake in $90 million by 2017.
I've always thought that fashion and music go in line together. When we think of Big Bang and 21, we think of their songs, but behind their performances, it's their styling and fashion that makes them a whole.
It even jumped on the popularity of Korean cosmetics with its own line, Moonshot, targeting K-pop fans with Asian facial features. Recognizing YG's growth potential, French luxury goods giant LVMH has announced that it'll invest up to $80 million in the company. While YG may be at the top right now when it comes to branching out, it's not the first. SM Entertainment, a Hallyu pioneer, started diversifying its business 2 years ago. It acquired travel agency BTNI, offering music fans special concert tours in Korea. And last year, SM collaborated with publisher Design House to release the lifestyle magazine The Celebrity, printing an average of 80,000 copies a month.
As these SM and YG are entering these businesses, they could probably see some synergy when they utilize their artists in those areas. And as from customer standpoint, if they get more touch points.
Market watchers say it's important for them to keep their capital flowing, as it's too early to call these ventures a success. To promote their new businesses, it's also vital to keep the K-pop boom going.
In addition to reaching out to other industries, it's important that they stick to their original source of profit, producing good music to expand their fan base worldwide.
If YG and SM's new business ventures enjoy the same success that K-pop has, it'll not only provide a new source for profits, it'll also give a boost to a new kind of Korean wave. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Monday morning here in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. Protests continue in several U.S. cities for the fourth night running against a recent spate of police confrontation that ended with the deaths of unarmed black men. Demonstrations, which began peacefully, turned violent in some states, with some protesters throwing rocks and bottles at officers. Our Son Jung-in has this story.
Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of major U.S. cities on Sunday. Relatively peaceful marches are part of the ongoing protest that's been held since the announcement last Wednesday of a grand jury's decision not to indict a white police officer in the chokehold death of an unarmed black man, Eric Garner. The decision closely followed recent cases of police avoiding prosecution after being implicated in the deaths of African-American men. Some protesters staged a symbolic die-in, lying down on the ground for a few minutes in memory of Mr. Garner at Grand Central Station in Manhattan and Union Station in Washington. A march in Berkeley, California started peacefully. However, a group of some 200 people who split off from the main crowd later turned violent, smashing windows and pelting officers with rocks and bottles. Other protesters implored them to stop. In Seattle, at least 7 people were arrested. Demonstrations also took place in Florida, Colorado, and Chicago, demanding a fair execution of law regardless of race. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Typhoon Hagupit is slowly making its way out of the Philippines this morning as the more than 1 million evacuated residents arise to survey the damage. The typhoon made landfall on Saturday, packing winds of up to 175 kilometers an hour. Power and phone lines were knocked out and homes flattened as heavy rainfall and winds pounded an area near the region devastated by last year's Typhoon Haiyan that had killed thousands of people in its path. The country's interior minister said at least 3 people died in this year's strongest storm to date, including a baby girl of hypothermia. Its National Disaster Agency said Hagupit was moving northwest, its eye forecast to pass closest to Manila around 8 p.m. tonight local time. With memories of last year's monster storm fresh on the minds of residents, coupled with a massive evacuation operation, this storm appears to have dealt a weaker blow, though concerns of landslides and flash floods remain. Meanwhile, Seoul's foreign ministry issued a travel warning to the Philippines. The government said it was discussing a humanitarian aid package and is also looking into sending a task force team into the country. Tehran has officially charged an Iranian-American journalist of unspecified crimes after holding him for more than 4 months. Washington Post bureau chief Jason Rezaian, who holds a dual citizenship, had been detained since July. The paper reports the journalist attended a 10-hour court session on Saturday, during which he signed paperwork acknowledging that he was being charged. The court, however, reportedly did not state what he was being charged with. In a statement released on Sunday, his family condemned Iran's ongoing disregard of its own laws, stating that Rezaian has been denied a lawyer and bail. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry also issued a similar statement, saying he is raising the case and also those of other detained U.S. citizens with Iranian officials. And finally, an Uber driver in India has been arrested after a female passenger charged the man had raped her in a secluded part of New Delhi. The 26-year-old said she had called the smartphone app-based cab service Friday evening from a restaurant. She said she had fallen asleep in the cab when she was raped and that the driver warned her not to report to authorities before dropping her off near her home. Police said the driver later abandoned the car.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off in women's golf, where the Korean golf stars faced off against the Japanese golf stars in a two-day tournament starting on Saturday. And on Sunday, they cruised through for their 7th win. And of course, Koreans made sure they won the tournament quickly as they started off the second round of the tournament, winning the first 6 matches before losing 1, as Kim Hyo-ju starts it all off with an amazing come-from-behind victory in the 18th hole. Now, Korea will win their 12th annual event, 25-11, and now have a record of 7 wins, 2 draws, and 3 losses so far. And now shifting over to speed skating this time, where despite her knee not being 100%, Lee Sang-hwa continues her gold rush, winning the 500-meter gold twice during the 3rd stage of the 2014-2015 ISU Speed Skating World Cup in Berlin, coming in at a final time of 37.87 seconds and 37.96 seconds, respectively. And now with that moving on, the baseball season might long be over, but there was baseball to be played on Sunday afternoon when former Samsung Lions legend Yang Jun-hyuk held his annual Hope Plus charity baseball game. And now with all the proceeds going to youth baseball here in the nation, 60 active and former ball players, including several celebrities, were on hand at the Mokdong Stadium on Sunday as Team Lee Jong-bum took on Team Yang Jun-hyuk. And after an entertaining back-and-forth game, Team Lee Jong-bum wins 15-13 for their 2nd straight win, as MLB hopeful Kim Kwang-hyun of the SK Wyverns won the MVP honors. Meanwhile, the Kia Tigers fans got the good news over the weekend that Philip Humber, who threw a perfect game back in 2012 for the Chicago White Sox, signed with the team. But in even better news, well, Yang Yeon-jung is staying for another year. Now, after the Kia Tigers declined the posting fee made for Yang Yeon-jung, the lefty expressed his desire to test out the Japanese market as well. However, after meeting with the team officials, the two sides have agreed to stay put, as Yang Yeon-jung will stay with the Kia Tigers for at least another year. Yang will, of course, be eligible for free agency after the 2015 season. Now, finishing things off in football, now during the gold medal match between South and North Korea in the Asian Games men's football tournament, the South won on a last-second goal from Im Chang-woo. That didn't sit well for a couple of people on the match, and suspensions were handed down months after that match. Now, North Korean head coach Yoon Jung-soo, who argued aggressively with the referee shortly after the goal, has been given a 1-year suspension from football, while North Korean midfielder Kim Il-young, who threw a water bottle at an official, received a 6-month ban from the sport. Meanwhile, head coach Yoon, who is set to coach the 2016 Summer Games team, will not be able to coach the team anymore. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, early morning snow coated most parts of the nation. The roads and sidewalks have turned into snowy and wet, but as we can see, snow has let up for the upper parts, but southeastern regions are still receiving heavy snowfall at this hour, but it's forecasted to let up shortly before the morning rush hour. Snow should melt quickly as the morning goes on. The afternoon temperatures will finally reach above the freezing mark here in the capital under lots of sunshine. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The low in the capital kicked off at -3, then the afternoon temperature will hike up to 3, while Daegu and Gwangju peak at 7 and 8 respectively, and Busan will top out at 9 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island will be getting up to 10, while Daejeon and Dokdo see highs of 4 and 5 later in the day. Be careful out on the icy and snowy roads this morning. And that's all for Korea. And here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's going to do it for now. Plenty more online, and Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour, 7 a.m. Korea time. Have a fabulous day. Goodbye.